All right, everybody, we're ready to get started. I'm Jennifer Miller. I'm the initiative lead for GlobalPDX, and we're really excited to continue doing events during this time. Of course, we've pivoted to doing things virtually, but we've actually had this really fantastic thing happen where we are reaching a totally different audience than we were before. We're making new connections with people we hadn't met before, so it's been really good to have this virtual session going. With that in mind, if anyone's willing to share their video, that's fantastic. Kind of gives us a more personal feel. But of course, if you don't want to do that, we totally understand. What we're doing today is having a talk with Micaela Schweitzer-Bluhm, who is our diplomat in residence here in the Northwest. And she's here to tell us all about sort of what you can expect as far as hiring goes, the hiring process goes, what jobs are still available and out there through COVID, has some good news about the hiring process that I'll let her tell you about. And also, of course, as sort of a representative of the government, if you guys have questions just as far as what it means to work in the government, what that feels like, and how she would recommend your particular skill set might be suited to a job, she's here to answer all of that. So Micaela, I'm gonna turn it over to you, give us a brief introduction.
Okay, great. Can you hear? You can hear me? Great.
Good.
All right, great. Jennifer, thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation to join you and speak with GlobalPDX today. I always enjoy my interactions with the GlobalPDX community, so it's fun to do this, even if I can't be there in person. So this is great. As Jennifer said, everyone, my name is Micaela Schweitzer-Bluhm. I am the diplomat in residence for the Northwest. And that's essentially a fancy title for a recruiter. My job out here in the Northwest is to get out, talk to people, make sure that people are aware of the State Department as an employer, what kind of opportunities there are with the State Department, and then to give people advice and help mentor and coach them through the process of applying. So I try and share as much information as I can about the opportunities with a wide variety of groups, universities, colleges, professional groups like your own, anyone and anyone who's willing to listen to me. You know, the State Department is a very unique employer, and the work that we do and the careers that we have are very unique opportunities. When I joined the Foreign Service, which was almost 24 years ago now, seems strange to say that, but it really has gone by quickly. You know, the Foreign Service was still not, it wasn't well known. I was a student studying international relations, and it wasn't until my junior year, after I had done study abroad, that I even found out about the Foreign Service as a career opportunity. And I was studying international relations. So the problem is we still have that challenge. We're still not as well known of a career potential. And particularly, I would say, the variety of jobs that exist with us. If anyone does know about the Foreign Service, they tend to know about diplomats and they know about Foreign Service officers. But they don't necessarily realize that there's a whole wealth of Foreign Service specialist opportunities that are really critical to our operation, really critical to our diplomacy, and that provide fascinating opportunities for folks in specialized areas such as IT, engineering, security, office management, medical. We hire in all those areas, facilities management. So those are all critical areas, and that's a big priority of our recruiting. The other area of our recruiting is that's a real priority for us is diversity, and wanting to make sure that we're recruiting a Foreign Service that reflects the United States and reflects the really rich diversity that exists in the United States. And so wanting to make sure that we get out and that we make sure that people see themselves in the Foreign Service. So we do a lot of outreach and events to try and encourage a much broader population of people to consider opportunities in the Foreign Service. A little about me. As I said, I've been in the Foreign Service for 24 years. I have served in Nepal, Tunisia, Egypt, Iraq, Jerusalem, Croatia, North Macedonia, and I've also served in Washington, D.C. My last assignment before becoming the diplomat in residence for the Northwest was as the Deputy Chief of Mission at our embassy in Skopje, North Macedonia, which was a wonderful experience. I'm originally from New England. I'm not from the Northwest, but I have been just truly enjoying seeing this amazing part of the country. I mean, as I was saying at the beginning here, I just had a wonderful opportunity to go up to Northern California and the Redwood National Forest recently. So, and I really enjoyed my trips to Portland before we were not traveling so much. So why don't I stop there? That's just kind of a brief introduction. And then Jennifer, I'm happy to take any kind of questions.
Fantastic. So if you guys don't mind, I think a great way for us to kick off is just to go around and just share your name, share a little bit about yourself, and particularly what your interest is in this session, what kind of things you'd like to hear, what kind of topics you'd like to discuss, and Mica and I will go from there. So Sara, if you don't mind, can we start with you?
Hi. Okay, let me, I'm gonna like walk outside where hopefully the bright sunshine and blue sky will conceal my elderly nature, and you will see that Micaela, although you guys are, everybody's much younger than I am. And so let's see if I can turn this on. Okay, so I don't know who doesn't know about the State Department. And so I was kind of surprised when you said that you didn't know about the State Department. My story goes back to 1977 when I became a volunteer in Bangladesh, but not for the State Department. I was working at the time. The Peace Corps was a big deal, and I didn't want to take 2 years out of college. At the time, also, gap years were not done really. It's kind of the end of the kind of beginning of the era of that, but was kind of unusual. So I worked for a healthcare agency in Bangladesh, and I'm still in touch with them and still volunteering for them. The thing that was the part of the State Department story, your State Department story, that I thought was interesting for me, from my standpoint, was the embassy there was staffed by people who I think thought Bangladesh was a hardship assignment. I'm sure that Skopje was something of a hardship assignment at the time that you were there, because it's a small place. I don't know, please tell us more about it. But anyway, in Bangladesh, the embassy was a place you went once and then you tried never to go again. And if you were a volunteer like I was. And, but thank God it was there. When I was in Bangladesh, there was a dictator in charge, and I in power. And, you know, one of the scariest things for me as just an ordinary volunteer was, I hope I never get picked up by the police or anybody who looks at me as an American, and in their eyes, any American was also a member of the CIA. So just being an American there and looking totally different from every other Bangladeshi in the world, it was, the embassy was not a place that I went a lot. So I would be really interested to hear from you how you as a person who worked for the State Department, whether you thought that whether it was important to you to be serving the country in particular, for our country in particular, and whether you were ever hassled or had any trouble serving the country because of the politics of our country in relation to Macedonia.
That's
So
a great question, Sarah. I'm gonna
thanks
make
very
a
much.
note of that because I think that that's gonna lead into a lot of what other people here are asking about as far as how does it feel to work for the State Department? How does it feel to work abroad? So I think I'm gonna keep going around, just have brief introductions, and then we're gonna be able to throw those more kind of specific questions back to Mica. Marcy, could we have you go next?
Hi, my name is Marcy. I'm actually sneaking in because I live in Seattle, but follow Portland PDX.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Global. I actually have a previous history with, I worked at USAID, I did the Peace Corps, and now I'm not working at anything related to international relations or development. So I was just taking this opportunity to catch up on what was going on and hearing about how, because I'm still kind of thinking about it for a future career change at some point.
Great. Thank you so much. We're happy to have you. All right, Tashi, could we have you go next?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi, Micaela. Thanks for organizing this. I also kind of snuck in as well. I'm from Vancouver, Washington, right across the river, but I'm currently a grad student at Tufts at the Fletcher School. So Micaela, I'm regularly in touch with Phil over there and knock on his door a lot. But specifically today, wanted to find out more, and I can save it more to the Q&A session towards your experience being an FSO during presidential transitions, and then specifically this incoming A100 class is announced they're going to be entirely virtual. And I'm curious how you think that will affect A100s going forward, and how that will affect the cohesiveness of new FSOs going in. I'm also going to be taking the FSOT in July as well. Thank you.
Great. Oh, Jennifer, I think you're still muted.
Thank you. All right, next, let's go over to Shannon O'Brien.
Hello. I have to jump off for like 5-10 minutes, but so thanks for recording. But what I'm hoping to address, I guess, I work with Medical Teams International in the Portland area. I served as a Jesuit volunteer in Tacna, Peru, and then was working with immigration in Mexico before that. I've thought of the idea of working with foreign service and have talked to a few other diplomats. So I guess just learning more about it, because I think everyone that I've come into contact with has done more of the visa route, and I'm more interested in like public health, community organizing, development route. So wondering what spaces in the State Department would be more focused on that path. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Let's go over to, I see the title name Goose.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, apologies, my camera's broken. And second apology, my husband changed that to Goose and I didn't realize till this call started, so sorry about that. My name is Joyce. I just have a couple questions. I feel like it's maybe too late for me to switch careers. I have about 20 years in kind of boring administrative jobs and I'd love to change this. I was in the Peace Corps almost 20 years ago. Career never really took off for me after that. I'd love to make some change. I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I don't know what that looks like for foreign service workers. I know some people bring their kids. I don't know if Micaela could speak to that at all. Yeah, and I think other people mentioned similar questions. I have visa window versus other options. And, those of us who aren't in our 20s anymore. So that's about what I'm here to listen to, things along those lines. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Let's go over to Sam. Sam, you want to give us a brief introduction?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, my name's Sam. I'm here in Portland. Kind of similar background, I think, as a lot of people. I studied international relations at University of Oregon and was in the Peace Corps in Nicaragua as an English volunteer, and then did a graduate internship with Peace Corps Colombia. And took the FO Foreign Service exam once when I was in Nicaragua, and kind of was interested in, I think, as somebody else had mentioned, in kind of the public diplomacy, political affairs arena. But after the first time I took it, I just got, distracted with life and other job careers, other job opportunities, and kind of never went back to it. But now I'm back here working with Portland and Kaiser Permanente and public health area, and kind of interested in, the overseas aspect and what kind of public health opportunities are available, and especially now with the, COVID-19 thing. I imagine it's a much bigger priority than it was before. So just interested in learning all information I can.
Great.
Great, thanks so much, Sam. I'd love to go over to Ted.
Yeah, hello, Jennifer again. Nice
Hi.
to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, I am currently evacuated from Indonesia as a Department of State EFM employee. So I'm back in the U.S. after for about now 3 months or so, and I'm not a Foreign Service officer. I'm a eligible family member who now works at the consulate in Surabaya, Indonesia. And so my interest in this webinar for lunch is just to get more information about the Foreign Service, and I like to hear what different people's careers look like, some of their different jobs, because the people I've talked to so far it's amazing what sort of jobs people can kind of find themselves in the Department of State overseas. It's not just always at the consular window or doing public diplomacy, that sort of stuff. So I'd just like to hear what other people's career paths have kind of been, what their experiences are, and yeah, I'm just here waiting to go back to Indonesia whenever phase 3 of the Diplomacy Strong kicks in. So that's me.
Great, thanks so much, Ted. And finally, let's go over to Lauren.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, Micaela. Thanks for hosting this. So yeah, a little bit about me. The past 4 years, I've been working at a social enterprise in East Africa. We were based in Kenya and just recently relocated back to Portland. And kind of career-wise, looking to elevate my experience working at a medium-sized social enterprise into working at a larger organization, like the Department of State. I think for questions today, so I work in training and development, and what we're seeing is donor funding is shifting quite rapidly. And often the first thing to go is training for employees. So would love to hear like what's going on in the Department of State, if you anticipate any decline in terms of focus on continual growth for employees, and if there are any future opportunities in that field. Thanks.
All right, I think I've hit everyone. Jump in if I skipped you, but I think we've all introduced ourselves. I think that's a great way to kick us off is Lauren's question. Mica, do you want to talk a little bit about, as we titled this session, the temperature of the State Department? How does it feel for people who are looking to come in and get a job with the State Department right now? What effects have you seen through COVID? Just sort of tell us, update us on what's going on in general.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you guys all asked fantastic questions, and it's nice to have this chat with everybody. So I've been taking notes. I know Jennifer said, "Oh, you don't have to take notes, Mica. I'll take care of it." But I did, because that's what I do. I can't not sit in a group meeting and not take notes. So how does it feel to work at the State Department right now? I mean, I think we're facing all of the same challenges that everyone's doing. We're not an organization that has typically worked remotely. By nature of the work that we do, particularly overseas, we do a lot of work in a classified environment. And so that has proven to be a challenge. But I think that we've shifted really incredibly. Our technology folks made enormous strides to shift all of our applications. I had a conversation with somebody last month, and they talked about moving 60 different applications online. Making them available remotely when we used to have them in very narrow technology channels. So it's been a big kind of cultural shift for the Department of State to be shifting to remote work. And that's been a challenge, but one that I think folks have really risen to. The hard thing, as Ted can attest to, is that it really has changed, our global footprint. So, we always generally have at least one post, one embassy or consulate, if not two, in some kind of what we call a drawdown, an evacuation situation. And that could be because of health issues, it could be security issues, it could be political unrest. There's a whole variety of reasons why that happens. One of my jobs in Washington, D.C. was as the director of our crisis management unit. And so one of our jobs was to try and anticipate where these crisis events would happen and then help posts prepare for them and then help them through it when they did it. So we were constantly evacuating posts. Right now, we're in a global evacuation, which is something that is very rare. I don't think we've ever experienced that. And so having everyone in the world separated from their families at this time, or having people who maybe had underlying health conditions and needed to come home, that's been a big disruption. We're a big global family. I mean, when Ted says he's an EFM, I'm like, all right, family. He's like my cousin in the Foreign Service. When I go to campuses, inevitably, children of Foreign Service officers and specialists will come find me at a career fair. And they'll just say, I just really wanted to see you. I wanted to say hi. And I feel like their aunt, like their Foreign Service aunt, And I'll tell you, 7 times out of 10, I know their parents. We're not that big of an organization. The Foreign Service, the State Department is an employer of about 77,000 people. But the vast majority of those are local staff. The American staff is only about 25,000, and that's divided down into civil service, which is our domestic US-based service, and foreign service. So the foreign service is relatively small. It's only about 13,000 total. So we are a family, and this kind of global disruption of our family, we all feel it. But we're all bonding together, and I think providing support where we can. So there's that cohesion of that esprit de corps, really, that even in a crisis, we kind of pull together. In terms of hiring, I will say that it's robust. Like, there's no stop in our hiring. I will say, I feel like I have almost been busier during this pandemic period because being virtual, folks I can do multiple events across my region in one day. So it's been quite busy, and I think it's giving people time to reflect on, where do I want to go next? What do I want to do? And so a lot of people are looking for an opportunity to talk about their careers. We have not paused our hiring. Our hiring takes a long time. So in the Foreign Service, the process of joining the Foreign Service, whether for officers or specialists, can be about 18 to 24 months. So for us, we definitely don't want to pause that. Our civil service is a shorter hiring time frame, but it still is lengthy at some months. We did have to pause we had A100, our orientation classes scheduled at the end of March, beginning of April, and unfortunately the timing was just such that it's the pandemic situation kind of erupted right in the face of that, and there was no way to pivot quickly on that, and so those had to be postponed. Those classes were reconstituted, and those people were brought on board virtually in May. We also brought on civil service employees virtually throughout the period starting in April. And we're going to have another orientation class of officers and specialists next month, which will also meet virtually. You know, virtual is different. You're not hanging out with your, you know, it's called A100. Orientation is called A100, and your orientation class is your initial bond. That's your sisters and brothers in the Foreign Service. Then you start going out to building your family from there. So that initial bond, you know, they're having to do that virtually. But I do think that right now, I mean, we're all virtual, and so they're finding ways to connect and create that bond. And certainly, they're going to be one of the most unusual A100 classes, and they'll have that cap always. So, you know, it's moving forward. I think there's also a real sense of purpose in the State Department around the pandemic. You know, one of the most important things that we do overseas is to provide assistance to American citizens, whether or not on a daily basis of just replacing a lost or stolen passport, or helping them return home in a crisis. And that's been a huge part of what we've done this spring. So we've affected the largest evacuation of American citizens that we've ever done from pretty much every single country in the world. You know, a month ago, I knew the number was about almost 80,000 Americans. And that's no easy task. It's a huge task. There's some really great video and stories about that that's on our American Diplomacy Museum, their website. There was a video I posted from one of the embassies. There's just been a lot of really compelling stories about that work, which has been really tiring but so vital and important. You know, the first question that I got was about public service and about, you know, did I join the State Department for a sense of service to my country? And absolutely. You know, when I was looking for a career, I wanted a career that was going to let me see the world, but it had to be a career where there was public service involved. I knew that was going to be an important part of what I did going forward, and I wanted to have work that I felt was purposeful. And I have done a variety of different jobs, and there were a couple of different questions about the different types of work, and I'm happy to go into that. But, you know, sometimes the days have been hard, sometimes they've been weird, sometimes they've been funny, sometimes they've been depressing, sometimes they've been, you know, rewarding. They've always felt purposeful. Even on the incredibly hard days where I haven't slept for 48 hours, you know, that felt important. So, and not just the evacuation of Americans, but I think the department is really quite involved in working across international organizations and across countries to provide assistance in this pandemic situation, to work with organizations like USAID and CDC, and to look at how we should be cooperating and to provide what assistance we can. So both on the assistance to American citizens and on the international assistance, there's been a real sense of purpose driving people in this time.
Wow, that's so fantastic to hear. I think I'm just going to pull out one or two more threads from the things we talked about initially, and then I'm going to let you all jump in and have the specific questions that you want to ask. It seems to me that another sort of topic that raised to the front is, what does it look like to transition into a State Department job or an FSO job when you already have a career or the makings of a career or even a family at home? Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, that's a great summary of a bunch of different threads that did come up. So glad you did that. Yeah, the average age of folks that join the Foreign Service is 34. So we get people at both ends of their career, both at the beginning and after they've had a full career. You know, we have people join at all different phases of their life, and it's such a unique career that you know, we really do welcome a variety of people with different experience levels and different perspectives. So it's never too late. I mean, we do have an age limit, so there is that. But it's quite generous. You just have to join by your 60th birthday. So we do have that because we have a mandatory retirement age. But otherwise, you should feel like it's always an opportunity for you, and we're always going to welcome you. I think that you do join as an entry-level person, but we are such a unique organization. You really get an amazing amount of responsibility at very early in your career. And so even if you're joining as an entry-level officer, even after you've had a 20-year career doing something else, there's opportunities for you. I think also in some of our specialist career tracks, we really love having people join who have had other careers, a lot of professional experience. Joyce mentioned that she's had 20 years in administration, and boy, Joyce, we'd love to have you. I have several jobs that I could direct you to right now. So, please think of us. I think it is frequently when people have kids, they're frequently asking, how do I make that transition with my children? I have 3 children. I joined the Foreign Service early in only a couple of years out of college, so I did not have children when I joined, but I have had 3 children along the way. Met my husband on my first tour, and so we've traveled together, not always posted together, but we've traveled together. And it's an interesting life for children. I think the overseas experiences my children have had have just been incredibly rich. The schools are excellent. That's one of the great benefits of the Department of State. Your children's education overseas is paid for. And we make sure that the schools are adequate and are safe and have good resources. We have a whole department in the Department of State that is responsible for coordinating and funding international schools. Children are so resilient, and particularly when they start this lifestyle young or are born into it, I think it's just what they're used to. Ted can speak to some of the experiences of family members, but I will also say, one of the questions I often get is, well, would my spouse have opportunities overseas? What would that be like for my spouse? And in my time in the Foreign Service, I've seen just a real transformation in that. I mean, Ted talked about how he's in an eligible family member position. When I joined the Foreign Service, we did not have those. And that's really made a lot of difference. Also because it puts you in a core of your own. So another development that came along in the last 10 years was, Ted now as an eligible family member employed can carry his security clearance and his hiring eligibility to his next post, which didn't used to be the case. So family members can have, a progressive series of jobs. I mean, with the increased internet and just companies being so much more remote too, there are so many more opportunities for family members to continue the work they're currently doing. So there is a lot of that. I think it is much easier for families now than it used to be, and your family goes with you everywhere you go. I mean, there are certain places where family members are not eligible, but those before you bid on those assignments, and you make the decision about that based on that.
I feel like we have one more just kind of common thread, and then I'll let you guys jump in, and that's around the apparently dreaded visa window. It sounds like a lot of people kind of have that in mind as far as their first at least couple of years in the Foreign Service, but could you speak maybe a little to less vilify that visa window, but also a little to other roles? What kind of public health, community organizing, emergency response do you see that people should know about?
Yeah, sure. So for foreign service officers, there are 5 career tracks: public diplomacy, political, economic, management, and consular. Every foreign service officer does consular work as part of their first 2 assignments. And that's for a couple of reasons. Really, consular work is the core of our function. The original consular officers were the original diplomats. They were the first to go out. George Washington commissioned the consular service when he became president of the United States. So it is the oldest part of the Department of State. Having a consular officer in the port of call where U.S. merchant ships came in was critical. Sara probably had something along that line back in the day. So it's, and like I said, helping an American citizen is the most important thing that we do. And in a crisis, we're all consular officers. So everybody gets experience doing consular work. Everybody also gets experience doing visa work because it is the #1 thing that people care about overseas. And you, as a foreign service officer, regardless of whether or not you're public diplomacy, political, economic, management, or consular, you need to understand what visa work is like, what people's interests are in visiting and coming to the United States. You need to know how that work is done. You need to understand that core function of our job. It doesn't, an ambassador can be going to do a big falutin policy event. I can guarantee you there is at least 10% of the audience that only want to hear about visas. It is the most important thing that people care about. So it's really critical that we understand that and that we take part in it. I learned an enormous amount from my year as a consular officer on my first tour. It taught me a ton about being a good diplomat, about engaging with the people of the country that I was in, and about understanding that there's a lot of depth to a country and what's driving their economic situation or their political situation. Some of our best reporting cables about trends in a country actually come from our consular officers on the visa line, who really are seeing just a really broad spectrum of individuals from a country. So consular work is critical. I always encourage folks to look at it as the vital function that it is of the Department of State. You asked about a couple of people talked about public health and public service and community organizing. Part of the core of our policy efforts around the world is to promote democracy, promote rule of law, to promote civic engagement. And so, whether or not you're a public diplomacy officer or a political economic officer, you're a lot of the times out there talking about these issues, talking about, well, what's civic engagement? How is that part of a democracy? Working with NGOs that are trying to create the space for citizen engagement. That's a big part of what we do. Public health, we've always had an issue on public health. I mean, pandemics have been part of our planning and part of our experience for several decades now. When I was in crisis management, we did a ton of planning around pandemics and working with embassies who were trying to work bilaterally with the countries that they were in to look at public health, to look at public communication in the event of pandemic, and to figure out what was the best way forward. State Department officers also work really closely with USAID. I mean, USAID has a that's the Agency for International Development. They have a very important mandate in the area of public health. So that's, for folks that are interested in that, AID is also an excellent organization to take a look at.
Great. Okay, we're going to start with specific questions. I have one that came in from Sara that I think I can sort of loop in with what Tashi was talking about earlier, which is sort of really regards to your well-being, how you felt safety-wise in your different postings, and to sort of be more specific, how about with when a new president comes into office, how does that feel where you are? Were you ever afraid? Is that something that someone who's looking at a foreign service career should think about?
Sara, I think, also talked about hardships, and I frequently get questions about, well, what is a hardship post and what does that mean? And hardship is, it varies from place to place, but I've served in a lot of different places, in a lot of different circumstances, and I've definitely faced risk. Probably Baghdad in 2004 was the most risk I've ever faced, but I felt very well prepared. There was also a question about professional sort of training, and we in the Department of State, I have always felt really well taken care of in terms of professional development, in terms of training to ensure that I had the tools that I needed to do my job. And that includes understanding risk and understanding what I could do to improve my own personal security and safety, and what I needed to do to help ensure the safety of the whole mission community. Every time you go to a new place, the first thing you do is sit down and get a briefing on the security situation in that country. And that can be as simple as, this is the place you don't jog at night, or, don't drive this way because that will provoke people to a certain reaction. I mean, we know that each country is different and you have to be oriented to it. So we take security very seriously. We can never mitigate risk to the point of being zero. That just is not realistic, but we try and give people the information and the skills and training to be able to take care of themselves. And we have enormous security programs to try and augment that and make sure that we give them the programs and tools to be secure. So I have felt at risk, but I have felt prepared and well taken care of. The other question about transitions. I've worked for 4 administrations. I came in the Clinton administration and worked for President Bush and President Obama, and I worked for President Trump. Each transition is a little different, but largely you don't feel it as much overseas. Foreign policy tends to be, in general, the area that largely the goals are always the same. It's the method of achieving those goals and those interests might be slightly different. And so you certainly, you have to pause and you have to learn what the new administration's priorities are, and make sure that you're understanding that, so that on day one, you can reflect the administration's positions and talking points and approach. But it is a partnership, and our job is, as the Foreign Service, is to be feeding information in, so that we ensure that the administration has the best information that they can possibly have and the best analysis that they possibly can have, so that they can make well-informed decisions. So, I think that that's been a really interesting part of the job as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, very cool to hear about. I can only imagine how some of those positions must have been. Who else has some questions for Mica? Anybody else? All right, well, I heard
I can throw one out. Is just simply, I'm curious about the current position that you're in. How long is that position? Are you going to be in that position? Is this more of a senior type position where you had to work a while before you could get a nice job in the Northwest to enjoy some craft beer and some wonderful pizza and other things? Or are you looking at heading back overseas? What's your next bid list looking like?
Yeah, so the diplomat and residence positions are generally 2 years. And that back in the day, they were viewed more as sort of rewards for maybe ambassadors who were looking to sit and reflect and think big thoughts. But Secretary Powell actually initiated quite a change in that and said, you know, these need to be recruiters. We need to make sure people are getting the word, and we need people out there. And so he expanded the program and really pushed for us to have more diplomats in residence and to have diplomats in residence that really reflected the Foreign Service. So at this point, actually, we have 16 diplomats in residence around the country, and then we have national recruiters who are based in Washington. And the diplomats in residence sort of are at the mid-level and above. So you do have to have a certain number of years so you know what you're talking about. But my colleagues really reflect a broad spectrum of the Foreign Service, both Foreign Service and Foreign Service specialists. So our diplomats in residence are both officers and specialists because we are recruiting for both. And so we want to make sure that we're getting out there and showing who we are. And it's an important part of our institution. They're very competitive. So we try and get our best folks out to represent the United States, or the Department of State to the United States, so that we can recruit effectively. But it's been a wonderful opportunity. I can tell you the Northwest is definitely a competitive one to get. It's an enviable place to be. Everybody wants to be recruiting in the Northwest, so I was very fortunate, and it's been a wonderful opportunity. I think Jennifer, also, I do want to make sure, a couple people asked about the Foreign Service Officer test, so if I can just quickly touch on that too. Tashi, I know you said you've registered for the July test. That's great. Good luck. Keep in touch. Let me know how it goes. We did have to postpone that test slightly. So it would have been in June normally, but it's going to be in July. But we plan to move ahead with the October test on schedule and the February test on schedule. So, you know, anyone who's thinking about applying as a Foreign Service officer, definitely doing some research on the test. We have a great app, DOS Careers, that you can download. It's got little quizzes on it. They're divided by subject, so it really helps you figure out where you're strong and where you need to study. I love that. And then we have a full practice test. We have reading lists and other things like that on the website. For folks that are thinking about the specialist positions, you don't have to take the Foreign Service Officer test. Those are separate processes, and you go through a different qualification review that first looks at your technical skills and do you have what we're looking for in those specialty areas. And then the one other thing I'll mention is the Consular Fellow program, which I haven't touched on really, but if people have language skills in Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, or Mandarin, the Consular Fellow program is another great employment opportunity. It's not a career opportunity. It's a 5-year limited term appointment as a consular officer, but with all the benefits and status of being a Foreign Service officer.
All right, does anyone else have any specific questions? So I have one of my own for you, actually. You mentioned that you were getting your international relations degree. What did you envision you would do with that degree? What career did you envision for yourself?
Well, when I started, I had no idea, Jennifer. No, I think I definitely always wanted to, growing up, I always wanted to do something that was international. That was really important to me. And like I said, public service was very important to me. And so was that going to be journalism? Was that going to be working for a non-governmental organization? Was that going to be working on the government? I wasn't quite sure. But it was my study abroad experience that really focused my interests. When I studied abroad in Cameroon in Central Africa. And while I was there, I spent a lot of time talking about the United States and who we were and what we were about and how our democracy worked or didn't work and what were the pluses and the minuses. And I just spent a lot of time talking with people about the United States. And when I came back, I said to a professor, I really enjoyed that. Like, how do you do that? How do you represent the United States? And he was the one that said, well, you have to look at the Foreign Service. I said, oh, okay. I think it was Sara that said that she was surprised that I hadn't known about the Foreign Service, but I hadn't. And I will say, I run into people all the time who, I explain this career to them and they say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. This is so exciting. And that's what I love. That's what I love about this job. I have had 24 years of an amazing career. I've gone places, done things I never anticipated. And it's just been such a rewarding experience. And that's why I sought out this job. I really wanted to be able to share my enthusiasm for it, to try and motivate people who may not have seen themselves in the job to see themselves in the job and to consider applying and to know that it's achievable. Somebody else, I think, said that they had taken the test once and hadn't passed. That's like 60% of the Foreign Service. We've all taken the test and haven't passed the first time. I took it my senior year. I passed the written test. I got to the orals. I did not pass. I took it again the next year, got through. I have a friend who took it 6 times before she got in. So please, if you take the test and you don't make it along the way, please don't be discouraged, because that's like a rite of passage in the Foreign Service. It's been a wonderful career, and I really, if you're even thinking about it remotely, I really encourage you to look at it seriously and to be in touch with me about it. That's a big part of my job. I have office hours and I do one-on-one consultations with people where we kind of talk through their own individual situation or interests or where they're at in the application process, what do they need to think about and do next. So, please sign up for my office hours or shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. And if you're interested, please reach out to me. And if you haven't signed up, if you're interested in careers and you haven't signed up to stay in touch with us or get updates about opportunities that are coming up, I'm going to also put in the sign up that you can use to register and get updates about jobs and careers and things like that. So I just put that in the chat.
Great. Micaela, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with all of us. It's been great to hear from you. For those of you who are joining us, thank you so much. GlobalPDX is doing all we can to keep you connected, to amplify your voice. If you enjoyed this conversation, you might like our podcast, which just dropped. It's on our website and on Apple Podcasts. Feel free to check it out. And also, if you're either looking for a mentor or interested in mentoring someone yourself, please check out our Community Allies catalog. It's entirely private. It allows you to submit your name, your topic of interest, and if you want to be a mentor, what kind of expertise you have. And I am the only one who ever sees it. I partner you up with someone. You can have an informational interview just like that, and ideally an ally in your field. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And Mica's information is going to be shared with all of you as well in a follow-up email, along with some resources that we have for the FSO. So thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Jennifer. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.